Good morning and welcome to the 2016 Southern New Hampshire Transportation Update. My name is Donna Morris and I serve as the president of the Greater Salem Chamber of Commerce.
And I'm Will Stewart, president of the Greater Derry Londonderry Chamber of Commerce. And we're here today to hear about all of the exciting developments going along the I-93 corridor in Southern New Hampshire.
So this morning we're going to have an update from the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport, the project manager of the I-93 highway project, and also Concord Coach. So a little bit of airplanes, cars, and buses as it relates to the I-93 corridor. But more importantly about economic development. You want to expand on that a little bit, Will?
Sure. We have a saying in economic development that transportation is economic development, and that's certainly the case here in Southern New Hampshire along the I-93 corridor, which I'd say, by 2020, certainly by 2030, when all of these projects are completed and the effects are really being seen, that this region will be a lot different than it is right now and a lot more economically robust.
And certainly we're seeing that already in Salem as exits 1, 2, and 3 have come into completion, and you see what's happening as you go a little further north on 93 towards the Derry area.
Certainly, and certainly also all the expansion going on around Manchester-Boston Regional Airport with the opening of Pettingill Road and the new construction of the warehousing and manufacturing facilities out there. And I think with that, Woodmont Common coming along at exit 4A, it's really going to be exciting. Absolutely.
So sit back. Hope you enjoy the program this morning. And economic development is regional, so it's a pleasure to partner with you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Morris, and I serve as the president of the Greater Salem Chamber of Commerce.
And I'm Will Stewart, president of the Greater Derry Londonderry Chamber of Commerce, and we're both excited to welcome you to the 2016 Southern New Hampshire Transportation Update, where we're going to be learning all about the exciting developments happening transportation-wise along the Southern I-93 corridor and what they mean for your businesses.
So these events aren't possible without the support of our sponsors, so I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to thank both the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport, who sponsored breakfast, as well as Pentucket Bank, and John Devon from Pentucket Bank, who serves as the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Lending. Come on up, John, and say a couple words.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all here, and great to see the two chambers coming together. This is a great event, and when we think about economic development, Pentucket Bank's very involved in economic development. We're the founding sponsor of an economic development breakfast that we do at the chamber every year. And we just heard last month about great things that are happening with 2 large parcels of land, both at exit 3 and exit 2. So there's a lot going on in the area, and it's great to get these updates from these 3 very key providers of services and transportation that help us. And when we think about economic development, I think part of what we think about is actually the experience that we experience when we're doing business here or just living life. Now, if you think about your experience a couple of years ago when you used to get off exit 2 heading southbound. Can you remember that? Getting off exit 2 heading southbound, what that experience was like? We call them clover leafs, but there wasn't anything very fortunate for some people getting off at that exit. It was sort of hair-raising. And now what's your experience getting off exit 2? It's just like you're gliding into town, and then there's these spacious roads that just take you where you want to go. So the experience is completely different. So one of the things I want to do is thank all of you for being here, but I want to thank, for example, the Department of Transportation for what we are now experiencing at exit 2 and exit 3, and soon you'll be experiencing as you head further north. It's just a more spacious feel, and it's like you have these new gateways into your communities that make your communities more inviting, make it more easy for services and product to move in and out of your areas, and this is what creates economic development. And then when you think of the airport, if I was to tell you Monday morning I've got to fly out of town at 6:30 in the morning, what would be your first question to me? Why? Are you flying out of Manchester? Right? It's a very common experience now when someone local says they're flying somewhere. The next follow-up question always seems to be, well, are you flying out of Manchester? Because we know the experience of flying out of Manchester It's just like gliding in and gliding out. Whether you're dropping somebody off or picking somebody up, or you're trying to find some parking. But if you're going to Logan, that's a whole different ball of wax. So the experience that we get from Manchester Airport, and then when you talk about Concord Coach, you know, I've had a daughter that went to school up in Hanover. So you always think of Concord Coach bringing you down to Boston, but actually they go north and south. And so it's a very convenient, it's very dependable, it's affordable, and it's this experience where you just put someone on the bus and you know they're going to get there. Or how about, you know, those that have to commute to Boston or spend time going to Boston? I'm convinced that Concord Coach actually extends the life expectancy of people who decide to take the coach into Boston, let somebody else battle the traffic and go in and out, as opposed to you going in there yourself, battling that traffic day in and day out. So we have a lot of reason to be thankful for our presenters today. I thank you all for coming. And we have, if our representatives from Pawtucket Bank could just stand up for a second. We have several representatives from Pawtucket Bank.
That's
Our chairman and CEO, Scott Cody, is here. And we have a saying at Pawtucket Bank, is experience the Pawtucket Bank difference. So when you talk about experiences, hopefully what you'll find if you interact with our folks today, you'll experience people that are happy to talk to you, people that are more interested in hearing about your story, about your business, about what you're doing to create economic vitality. And we're less interested about telling you about us and our products and services. So we'd love the opportunity to engage with you afterwards today, answer any questions, see if we can help you do what you do to make this an economically vital region. So without further ado, we'll move forward with the program.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. So just very quickly, I'm going to take 1 minute to describe today's format. Basically, each of our featured speakers is going to have about 15 minutes to give an overview of what they do and how it relates to transportation, economic development, and the business community in our area. And then it's all about the Q&A. So be thinking of questions. We're going to open it up. I think we have at least a half hour to 45 minutes if everything goes to schedule, so they can hear your concerns and we can have a very interactive morning. So without further ado, our first speaker is Tom Malafront. He's the Deputy Director of Manchester Boston Regional Airport. And please join me in welcoming him to the stage. Tom.
Well, thank you, John, for the segue, and thank you, Donna and Will, for putting this event together. So Donna gave me two very explicit sets of instructions here. Number one, she said, "You're first, so don't mess up." And number two, be on time. So this presentation will take exactly 15 minutes. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. And pun intended, this is literally going to be the 30,000-foot perspective of the airport. So really all I'm going to try to do today is kind of do a broad brush what's going on at the airport. Who we are, what we do, what the economic impact is, airline industry changes. We could talk about that all day, and we won't get into that level of detail. But I just want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that are going on in the industry and how that impacts Manchester and how that impacts all of us as consumers. Talk a little bit about air service development. My former role was as the air service development director, marketing director, and that's a term that's not familiar to a lot of folks, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, what it is and how that works. And then we've had some really exciting new projects going on at the airport and some really positive movement on the real estate side, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about that because some of the other speakers talking about the improvements to I-93 and improving transportation options, those all kind of tied together. Then obviously we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So in terms of airport activity, we have a $45 million annual budget and we serve passengers from New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont, so we truly are a regional airport. And when we say regional airport, the misconception is we're talking about regional smaller airplanes, and that's not the case. It's the region that we serve. I kind of gave you the answer to the question because we don't have a lot of time here today, but normally when I ask folks, where do you think the #1 source of traveler comes from that uses the airport? The first answer is always Massachusetts. And years ago, before Southwest went into Boston Logan, the number of Massachusetts travelers was quickly approaching the number of New Hampshire travelers. At that point, before Southwest went into Boston, about 22% of the travelers that use the airport every day came from Massachusetts, so that number was getting very close. When Southwest went into Boston in 2009, that number dropped very precipitously down to 8%. And the reason for that is because now the folks that were driving all the way up to Manchester to get those low fares on Southwest Airlines not only had the ability to fly Southwest out of Boston, all of the folks inside of 128 primarily, but then Southwest had to compete with JetBlue and Spirit and the other low-cost carriers. So that created a bit of a turf war and a fare war, and that pushed a lot of traffic to the south. So that's the reason for part of that change. The other thing is when we talk about economic development, 52% of the people that use the airport every day, more than half come from outside of New England. So those are the people that fly in from all over the country, they rent cars, they get hotel rooms. They contribute about $750 million every year to our economy, so they're very important to us. Next slide. In terms of airport activity, we have 4 airlines, good news and bad news associated with that, which I'll talk about briefly. We serve about 2 million annual passengers, and just in terms of putting that number in perspective, does anyone know how many passengers Logan serves a year? This year, they're on track to do about 35 to 36 million. So in terms of comparing apples to apples, you just can't do it. It'd be very similar to going to a country store and comparing what they have and what they offer with a box store. Just because we have less than 10% of the capacity, less than 10% of the seats to sell every day. We also have about 160 million pounds of cargo that's processed at the airport every year. And to put that number in perspective, we're the 3rd largest cargo airport in New England, behind only Logan and Bradley. So cargo is not a very glamorous thing to talk about. Flying boxes around in the middle of the night doesn't generally attract a lot of media attention. But the cargo carriers provide the most jobs, and they provide stability for the airport as the airlines go through their various cycles. So that's a very important piece of what we do. About 35 to 40 departures a day, 150 operations a day, which is a takeoff or landing, 14 nonstop destinations, and 1 stop to the world. So the daily departures, I'm sure you're all aware, varies. Years ago, the schedule that you got in January was the schedule you had all year long. Now if somebody asks me how many flights a day you have, the answer is, well, which day? Because we have a different number of flights on Monday than we do on Saturday. We have a different number of flights in January than we do in March, April, and June. So the airlines really are controlling the capacity of the seats that they have, and they're only plugging in airplanes when they know they have the demand to fill as many seats as they can. And then quickly, when people say, well, you've got empty ticket counter space in the terminal, what's going on with that? We have empty ticket counter space because the 10 airlines that we had back in 2001 have either merged or acquired one another and are now down to 4. So without going through all of the detail on it, the 4 airlines on the top, from American to TWA, American West, and US Airways, those have all morphed into one airline called American. And when I see this slide, the first thing I think about, especially when you look at 4 different airlines, how many airplanes got parked, how many people lost jobs, and the size of the industry, how much it's shrunk. Delta and Northwest obviously are now Delta. United and Continental have combined to form United, and Southwest acquired AirTran. So those are the 4 major airlines. The bad news is there's only 4. So from a consumer standpoint, when you've only got 4 airlines, you know there's a lot of demand for the 4 airlines that control the seats, so we're all going to pay more money as time goes on. The good news from an airport operator standpoint is we've got 4 financially sound, strong airlines. We don't have to worry every day about them going out of business. And also they control 80% of all of the domestic seats in the country, so you can literally get anywhere you want to go to 80% of the markets across the country. The one that we're missing, obviously, is JetBlue, and that's a conversation that we've had on, year after year, and it's all about timing. They've always said to us, it's not a matter of if, it's when. When we got really close to having them several years ago and actually painted walls blue, you can't see them because it's behind the ticket counters. We were actually in Dallas meeting with Southwest when we got the word that Southwest was going to be flying into Boston. So that year, JetBlue was getting 13 new airplanes. All we were trying to get was 3 out of the 13, and we made a really strong case for that. As soon as Southwest made that announcement, JetBlue took all 13 of those airplanes and put them in Boston to protect their home turf. So walking out the door, we knew that that meant at least 5 years. We weren't going to see them for 5 years because now they're going to compete with Southwest in Boston. It's going to take time to see how those 2 competitors, divvy up turf. So long story short, we're kind of back to their next decision point, which actually takes place this month, and you'll hear about it in the news at some point. JetBlue right now is focused very strongly, as are the other airlines, on Havana, Cuba. So they get 6 new airplanes this year. They want to put them all in Havana. If they get 6 slots approved by DOT, that's where their airplanes will go. They've already told us that. If they get 3 slots, for example, which we think might be the case, then we get to compete for the other 3 with every other airport across the country. So trust me when I tell you we've made our best case. We've created an incentive package. We've worked with the state. And we've basically said to them, tell us what we can do to get you here. Tell us what we can do to move us up the list. And they've basically said that you've done everything you can at this point. So now the decision really comes down to them. So, and I'll try to go quickly here. I won't go through a lot of detail on this, but in terms of economic impact, we still contribute a little over $1 billion, and it's a conservative figure based on the 3 southern counties in the state. The airport leads to about 4,000 jobs, about half of those on the airport and half of those off of the airport, and I mentioned the economic impact from out-of-state travelers, which is very significant. That's just a breakdown of the jobs at the airport from cargo airlines, government, passenger airlines, rental car facilities, and then the 1,920 that are off-airport businesses that are basically support airport functions. And then in terms of air service development, without getting into a whole lot of detail, there's really three ways that we approach air service development. The first is you do everything you can. The rule of thumb in air service development is to maintain what you have. In other words, do everything you can to keep the airplanes that you have at the gate parked at the gate, because once a flight goes away, or a city gets closed, or an airline goes away, it's very, very difficult to get them back. So do everything you can, whether it's marketing, advertising, surveying consumers, do everything you can, talking with businesses, do everything you can to fill the seats and help make the airline profitable, because otherwise you're going to lose them. After you maintain what you have, the second thing is to enhance what you have. So we look at very specific DOT data, and we look at what flights are filling up the most, what flights do we need to improve upon, and the flights that are doing well, we call it load factor, which means the percentage of seats that we fill. The flights that we see load factors getting up into like the mid-90s, we're filling 90% of the seats every day. Those are the flights that we go back out to the airline and say, you know, we're filling so many seats that we're actually leaving people at the gate. People are having to buy those high fares because the cheaper seats are selling more quickly, so we're losing customers. Just to give you one example of a seat enhancement, one of the things that we've done with Delta Airlines. Delta used to fly 50-seat regional jets to Detroit. They merged with Northwest, they took over that hub, they started in Manchester, flew 50-seaters, and we were filling them up every day. So we went back to Delta and we said, you know what, we need a bigger airplane because the people that have frequent flyer miles that can upgrade to first class are having to go to Logan. So we need a bigger airplane and we need a first class product. So incrementally, we went from the 50-seater to the 70-seater, and last summer that route was so popular that they were actually flying an MD-88, which has 142 seats. And they were filling it every day, and they filled first class every day, and they made money on it. So as a result, a year later, they've actually added 5,000 seats to that route. Now I know Detroit isn't all that exciting for most people. I say we're adding seats to Detroit. But if you're going to Asia, if you're going to the West Coast, that's just one example of an upgrade in a market that's worked very well, and there's lots of other examples. And then the third is to expand, to talk with airlines like JetBlue and others that match our business strategy. If the business strategy for the airline doesn't match the market that we have, like a Spirit, for example, that model doesn't work for Manchester at this point. Someday it may, right now it doesn't, for lots of reasons that we can talk about after. And then it really comes down to profitability versus market share. So years ago, airlines would go into a market and they'd undercut their competitors, and they'd fight that battle for as long as it would take to steal customers and make themselves stronger. That's no longer the case anymore. And I'll just give you an example without going through all the airlines, what Southwest has told us. Southwest has a profitability goal of 15% for every flight. Every flight, every day, that's what they want to make. At an airport like Manchester, if they don't make that 15%, that airplane goes someplace else. At an airport like Denver or Boston or someplace where they've got lots of competition, they might give that more time because they know they've got competitive forces that they're dealing with. But the bottom line is it's all about profitability. And for people that say to me, you know, why don't you get this airline, and why don't you get, you know, these many more seats or more flights? The bottom line is the airlines have controlled capacity to the point where they are filling more seats and they are making more money, so they're growing. They're not growing at this point. Here or throughout the country, seats are actually still declining year over year. But at least they're making money now, and we're starting to see some of that growth and starting to see the airline industry turn around a little bit. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom line, the bottom line in air service development is really use it or lose it. So if we don't fill the seats, if the airlines don't make a profit, they simply go away. And it's a challenging proposition because from the airport standpoint, all we can do is provide the facilities and try to keep costs low because we don't control where they go. We don't control what they charge. We don't control their operating costs, although some people think we control all of those things. We certainly don't set their airfares. So all we can do is provide an environment where they can be successful. We keep our rates low. We try to make it an efficient operation. We try to be responsive. We just try to make it a good place to do business. And so far, we've been fairly successful, I think. Just in terms of some good news, and I'll wrap this up, our load factors last year averaged almost 90%, 87%. Southwest alone, they have 96 cities across the country. Manchester Boston Regional Airport filled more seats than any other Southwest city in the country. Good news. So then the next logical question is, well, if you're filling all the seats, why aren't we adding more airplanes? And the reason for that is because our fares are dictated very much by the large hub airport to the south of us. And just because we're filling up seats every day doesn't necessarily mean the airplane's making money. In fact, at Boston Logan, when Southwest competed with JetBlue and all of the others, there were lots of airplanes leaving the airport full every day, none of them making a profit because they had to push the fares down so low. So there's a balancing act in there. Yields are going up. Yields is basically how the airlines measure profitability. It's all the way down to the cents per seat per mile, which is just how they gauge it. Again, you see some increases. We're going up to 9 flights a day on Southwest to BWI, Baltimore, Washington. Americans added some service. Delta's enhanced some service. So we're going in the right direction. Good. And then just a couple of pictures of some projects that we have going on. We have a new passenger flow improvement project, which is improving the security checkpoint, a new consolidated rental car facility, and then I'll talk about some of these just really quickly in these pictures. So basically, just so you understand what we're doing, we're not building things just to build them. We're building things to be more efficient, to save money for the airport in the long run, and also to make the customer experience more streamlined. So we're taking the 2 checkpoints, if you're familiar with this, on the second floor, and we're combining them into one. The reason for that is, number one, it's going to allow more people to get away from the stairs and not have people backing down the stairs and escalators in the busy morning hours. But it's also going to allow TSA, instead of having 9 employees, which is what they require to open 1 lane, they will be able to open an additional lane with 3 employees. So it's going to be a much more efficient operation. So if you go to the next slide, this is basically what it's going to look like when it's done before Thanksgiving. 6 consecutive lanes, right down the consolidated lanes, right down the center of the building. Queuing will go kind of horizontally instead of in line with the staircase. We're realigning the concessions. And also when you walk into the terminal, now it's going to look and feel like you're at a New Hampshire airport. Right now it's kind of taken on a bit of an industrial complex type of feel with the fans and the benches and the TSA equipment that just keeps moving farther and farther into the middle of the atrium. And for a lot of people in the beginning when we were talking about this project, they said, well, we don't want to lose the look and the feel of the atrium. And my comment to that was, have you seen the atrium lately? We've lost the look and feel of the atrium a long time ago. So this is going to bring it back. So now when you're in the queuing line, you're going to stand under a high ceiling. You can go ahead to the next slide. This doesn't do it justice, but this is what it's going to look like. The blue and green, the glass that you see up top is actually going to be the White Mountains, the White Mountain scene. We're going to have the flume and like some birch floor to ceiling decorations. It's going to be carpeted, so you're not standing on a cold floor in the winter. The 6 consecutive lanes down the middle, new signage, new paint, new lighting, new PA system, so it's going to be much nicer for the customers. And then this is a quick shot of the new consolidated rental car facility, which will open the first week of June. You can go to the next one. So basically, we're taking the rental car counters that are in the terminal, we're moving them out to this new facility. It creates more efficiencies for them. It creates more revenue for the airport, so it's a win-win. It was paid for through customer facility charges, which is a tax on the cars, so it's basically already paid for, so we're not borrowing any more money. So it'll be a much more efficient operation for the car rental agencies, it'll be better for the airport. And then when we take those counters away, we're going to put in a new Starbucks, a seating area, televisions, charging stations, and we're just going to try to make it a comfortable area for meeters and greeters as well. And then just a couple of other quick things. We've had land in areas on the East Ramp that have been available for years with little to no movement. Now all of a sudden in the last 2 years with everything going on in the town of Londonderry with Pettingill Road and all of the development they've had. We've got people competing for real estate at the airport now, which is kind of a little bit of a culture shock for us. So we've got a new 30,000 square foot hangar going in on the east ramp. It's kind of a high-end avionics, ProStar Aviation. They do high-end avionics and maintenance work. This 17-acre site, which was developed by an unnamed company, we haven't really finalized the agreement yet. This represents a ground lease that's worth about $250,000 to the airport over a very long term. So all of these things that we need to do, so as the airlines go through these various cycles, the land leases and all of the other things help us stay whole, basically. And then these are the other 22 of the parcels that we have available all over the airport. And like I said, we're starting to see more interest in this land as a result of Pettingill Road, as a result of Raymond Wazora Drive being opened up, as a result of 93 being widened, as a result of the economy being good. So we're starting to see more of a connection with the folks that are sitting at the table with me here up front, but also more movement on all of this real estate, which means more jobs, more economic opportunity, and all of those things leads to more people filling seats in airplanes so we can go back to the airlines and go back to the first line and start that whole process again. So, and that's a fast and furious approach to what's going on at the airport, so thank you.
You looked at your watch, Tom. How'd you do?
14 and a half.
Excellent. Well done, very informative, a lot of very exciting things. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions for you a little later on in the program. So next up, I'd like to invite Wendy Johnson to the stage. Wendy is the New Hampshire Department of Transportation's project manager for the I-93 widening project, among a few other projects. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
First, I'd like to thank the Chambers for inviting us. This is a great opportunity for us. You never hear good things about roads other than we're stuck in traffic and all that stuff, so it's nice that you guys invited us. Thank you very much for that, and thank you to the sponsors, because like you had indicated earlier, without the sponsors, this event couldn't happen. For the version of the economy, you were talking, you stole every one of my points. I was going to tell about the gateway, it was going to be great. But you stole that. But that's okay, that's okay. So some other things that I was asked the other day, somebody asked me, they said, what does I-93 really mean? When is it going to be done? What are you doing for the economy now? So if you think about it right now, every day you drive by, you see every one of those contractors' vehicles out there. They're stopping and they're buying fuel and they're buying food and they're shopping in every one of the developments and the stores that we have along this corridor. So that's one thing that we're doing right now. The other thing we're doing is all those people, we supply them a job. So people come, they work. But I guess as far as the economy goes, and if we don't finish it, it doesn't really matter, right? So the rest of the presentation is about how we're going to finish it. So the number one question I get asked too is when? 2020. So that's the highlight. So I will tell you I am long-winded and I talk fast, so I'll try to stay within my 15 minutes. So the next slide, please. All right, so hopefully today we'll go over the scope of work, project implementation, construction updates, and the capacity improvement projects. I know you guys are also interested in maybe in hearing a little bit about 4A. I'm going to start off telling you that is not one of my projects, but I can give you a little bit of information as we go through the slides. All right, next. You guys have been driving through this for a dog's age. You guys know it's 20 miles of widening, reconstruction. There's going to be 45 bridges replaced, worked on, 23 new ones. 19 red list bridges were replaced. The last one came out of service in October December of 2014, so we're very excited about that. We're going to construct 3 new park and ride lots at exits 2, 3, and 5 and expand our bus service, which we're very excited about. Oops, can we go back for just one second? On the left side of the screen, you can kind of see we've got a little graphic here. That graphic is kind of important. What that graphic goes with every one of the slides that I'm going to talk about, so you'll see the graphic kind of changes a little bit. So here we're talking about exits 1 through 5 is where we're talking about. That's that 20-mile stretch. All right, so the project implementation. You can't take off and do 20 miles of roadway reconstruction, 45 bridges. You can't do all that in one bite, one project. Projects are too big. We need to take the projects and break them down into something that was more manageable for our contractors to bid on. And we needed to break it down into something we could pay for. So what we did is we broke it into 3 major categories, or I like to kind of call it project triaging. We did early action, we did mainline priorities, and then we did capacity improvement. So the the early action projects, those were the ones that were standalone that we could do. There was kind of quick hit projects. Those were park and ride facilities, they were single overpass bridges. That's what those were. Those are actually all complete now, so that's a huge milestone for us. The mainline priorities, some of those are active projects, but those were intended to address principal bottlenecks and do some needed capacity improvements and safety improvements. The capacity improvements, that's what you're seeing going on right now. That's our next phase, and you guys may have noticed it just kind of started this summer. So, very good. So the early action and mainline projects, those were the ones that are highlighted in the green here. The construction on those began in 2006. The projects included work at exits 1, 3, and 5. 1, 2, 3, and 5. 3 lanes in each direction were opened in August of 2015, so we just finished these. So $350 million for 19 construction contracts, and mainline priorities are nearing completion. So a lot of you drove through exit 3 to get here today. So exit 3 is, if you go to the next slide, please. Exit 3 is where the majority of the remaining projects are. There were 6 construction projects totaling $195 million there. 4 of them are complete, 2 of them are ongoing. And if you could go to the next slide. So exit 3, which is, so the east side of exit 3, that's the one that's ongoing right now. That one's going to be completed in this fall. That's where you see the new 111A coming into 111. You see the northbound ramps. That's that project. The one that's the next one down, which is on the right-hand side or the east side of exit 3, that one's going to be finishing up in June. So that one we see coming right up. And in March of 2016, we just completed the exit 2 project. So once we finish those 2 projects this year, then we're fully out of the first 2 phases of the construction. All right, so exit 3, I just told you about that when it relocated 1¼ miles of New Hampshire Route 111. It shifted 500 feet to the north. Former 111 is now Enterprise Drive. It's a nice little road to drive on now. So reconstructed the southbound on-ramps, and most of the work was on the new alignment or an old southbound main line. So it was $35 million, and it's going to be complete very soon. All right, so this is what it looked like in August. To give you an idea of how quickly things moved, August 2015, you're actually standing at the exit 3 southbound ramps, and you're facing west. So that's what it looked like. And then just a little bit later, we turned around. Now we've got the whole intersection up and functioning. We've got the roadway done. And you go to the next one. And that's what it looked like this winter. We were actually very fortunate to have a nice winter this year, so we were able to get the construction moving. So it was great. So one picture. So this is that new Enterprise Drive I was telling you about. This is the old 111. So that's what you were driving on. So it's kind of a big change in character. So the next slide, please. And this is what it looked like this winter. So I showed you at first, it just had some pavement and some curb showing. Now we've actually got traffic on it, and you can see we're still, actually in this picture, they're still doing some work. They're installing fence there on the left. So. All right, the next one is the one that's to the east. This one is going to reconstruct those northbound on-ramps, like I said. Again, this one's $35 million, and we complete this fall. All right, so this is what it looked like this winter. Can you imagine installing drainage in the wintertime? It just, it's unheard of, at least in New England. So this is what they were doing this winter. So you can kind of see that they've got some big equipment, some big toys out there digging some big holes. And this is what it looked like just in the wintertime. They've got that drainage in. They've stabilized the slopes. All right, so the next ones. These are the ones that are upcoming. These are the next 4 contracts to advertise. And I did throw in another one there on the bottom. So the 4 contracts that are left to advertise total $200 million worth of work. And they include the projects shown here, one up towards exit, north of exit 5, and then in the exit 4 area, which is kind of why we're here. Construction started in 2016, so we just started these earlier this spring. They're going to be complete by 2020. That's what I started out with, 2020. And these are going to be funded with revenue from SB 367, that 4-cent gas tax. And then on the very bottom of the slide, you'll see we have a park and ride facility at exit 3 that we're also going to be completing this, or advertising this year. That's not part of the capacity improvements. So we have the parking ride. So next, please. So here's where it gets kind of it's hard to see from there. But basically, if you think about it, the active capacity improvements between exit 3 and exit 4, that's the project that's ongoing right now. The project actually starts just north of, this is 111 over here, starts just north of 111 and continues all the way up to just shy of Kendall Pond Road. So if we go to the next slide. So you can see this, so all I did was I put that one picture on the bottom here. RSL began construction of this in the spring of 2016. They're constructing 3 miles of I-93. 3 lanes in each direction will be completed. They're going to widen the I-93 bridges over Northville Road and Fordway Extension, the recreation trail under I-93, and it's going to be about $55 million. Like I said, this one will be complete in 2019, so this is a good one. This is what it looked like earlier this winter, and I think you guys probably drove through this on the way here, and you can tell that we've lost a lot of rock in this area now. It looks a lot different. So one more, please. So right now you can see this is that same picture. I'm just facing in the other direction at this point. You can see what we're trying to do is build everything out of traffic. We don't want to be backing up traffic any more than we need to. But you can tell we have rock in the middle here, and what we're doing is you can see there's a little black, they're kind of like cups. So that's how we get started with the blasting. You can see we've already got some blasting going on here. What they're doing is they're taking all that blasted rock and they're crushing it so they can reuse it for the select materials. So we're kind of think of it as recycling. All right, so you guys have all been stuck in those rolling roadblocks. You're driving down the road and all of a sudden you're just stopped 3 times a day between 10 and 3. That's us, sorry. So this is what happens. So you guys are all stuck in traffic, but this is what's going on. The contractor goes and he puts all that stuff, he's ready to blast, and he's ready to rock and roll. He gets all of his equipment, they shoot the blast, the rock goes, I mean, you know, it is controlled, the rock goes everywhere. They've got a very limited amount of time to get all their equipment out here. They take all the equipment, they clean it all up, they sweep it all up, rolling roadblock goes away, nobody's the wiser for what's going on. So they don't just stop northbound or southbound, they do both lanes at the same time. So it can be quite a bit of a backup, but it'd be worth it in the end. That's what you said, right? It'd be worth it in the end. All right, next slide. All right, and again, this is another shot of what it looks like. We're standing on top of that rock cut now. We're facing north. And again, we're doing everything out in the crushers right here now. So you guys, when you drove through, there's a big crusher right here. All right, so traffic control. Like I said, you get stuck in that traffic, what happens? Your car breaks down, you have some sort of issue that goes on. Not a great thing. So on this particular contract, what we've done is, you can see we've got some signs out there right now. What we're doing is, this is the first project on I-93 to institute temporary widening, or a pull-off, so that if your car overheats, you have an issue. It's a place that you can pull over. One of the other things we've also instituted on this project during, think of it as commuter hours, is we've got a tow truck available to us as part of the contract. Our contractor hired a tow truck to come in. So if you break down, you pull into here, and he will tell you to the closest location to the right, to the north, and the closest location to the south. Depending on where you're at, he keeps you on the project limit, and then you get your own tow truck. But we get you out of the way so everybody else can keep moving. So this is something you're going to be seeing coming up. It's in locations that have narrow shoulders, so it's not in every phase. So the next slide, please. All right. So this is the next one. This is the one that hasn't started yet. This one was advertised earlier this spring, and it received Governor and Council approval just a few weeks ago in May. That one's going to propose to reconstruct 3.2 miles, 4 lanes in each direction, widen some bridges, $51 million, complete in 2019. Let me see. So this is the 293 split, and this is, if you were over here, this is exit 5. So the next slide. So this is what it looks like now. I don't have a picture of what it's going to look like later, but I'm a little curious to see what that is. The contractor is expected to get started within the next 2 weeks, so we'll see some active movement on here. So we'll have 2 active construction projects. So then that leaves 3 more left that we still haven't advertised. The goal is to advertise all of these this year. The I contract, which is right between exits 4 and exit 5. The D contract, which is right at exit 4. And the park and ride, which is down at exit 3. So this is the park and ride. This is about this one will be for 130 parking spaces. We were just talking about all work at exit 3. So this is 93 northbound right here. These are those exit 3 northbound ramps, and this will be the park and ride. You notice there's a big green space up here. That big green space is going to allow us future expansion. One thing we don't have at this location right now is bus service, but we did make sure that when we designed this, we made it so that we could do future expansion for the bus service if it ever chose to come to this location. Great. And that's all the details I just told you about. It'll be $2.5 million and it'll be complete in 2017. All right. So this is the area you guys are interested in. This is the Ash Street Bridge. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. And then the next one. New Hampshire 102 over I-93. These are sort of the pre-shots. This is what next year it'll say pre-construction condition. And then one more. Very good. So this project, the first one that will be advertised is the 14633D. It's going to reconstruct 2 miles of I-93. It's going to take care of the exit 4 interchange. There'll be 3 lanes in each direction. We have a lot of bridge work going on here. $65 million estimated project. It'll be complete in 2020. As you can see, we're going to be starting just at this location. Kendall Pond Road is in this area. You'll come up. This will be the exit 4. This is that Ash Street Bridge, and then the project will end right here. Next one, please. So this project is the next one after that. So all I-93 will be complete once this one is taken care of. You can see this is that Pillsbury Street Bridge. So this one matches into that last project I just showed you, the D contract. We have some transmission lines right here, to kind of give you an idea. So we have Pillsbury, transmission lines, exit 4A. So when you're driving up, that's a good spot. Like, think of it, you're driving about halfway between the two. That's about where it would be. This is going to reconstruct 2 miles of I-93, widen I-93 to 3 lanes in each direction, $33 million, estimated to be complete in 2020. So I told you I'd tell you a little bit about Exit 4A. Exit 4A is currently going through the environmental process right now. What that means is that the towns are working together to complete all that. The state is not necessarily involved in that. They're assisting with it, but it's not our deal just yet. The towns are paying for all that. Once they get through the environmental process, then the department will take over, well, not take over, but the department will continue and they'll step in a greater role. We'll get a consultant on board and we'll do the design for it. So one of the big questions we're always asked is, what about this project? What does that mean for this project? This project and the 4A project, they can accommodate each other. If we build this project first or we build the other project first, it doesn't matter. The two go hand in hand. Nothing precludes the other one from being constructed. So with that being said, I think that's about all I can tell you about Exit 4A. And then we have a website. We keep updating pictures there. There's updated pictures every month of the construction activity. You can sign up for traffic alerts. You can sign up for all kinds of stuff. I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Sure, again, a lot of questions that will be asked a little later in our program. So our final presenter this morning is Mark Sanborn. Mark is the Director of Government Relations and Corporate Development for Concord Coach and Boston Express. Please welcome Mark to the microphone.
So the folks in this room who know me know talking has never been one of my problems, but we wanted to save a lot of time for Q&A, so I'll probably be a little shorter. Plus Wendy's already hit the park and rides, and John has already given us credit for extending people's lives, so I don't really know if I can top that. Wanted to start off with 2 basic kind of overview where BX came from, and then 3 specific points. Boston Express is the result of New Hampshire trying to solve 2 public policy challenges. In the early 2000s, the last time commuter rail was a big initiative in New Hampshire, in the Nashua area in particular, and it failed in the early 2000s, the local state senators said, well, we need something. We need an alternative transportation and another mode, some form of transit there. So they went to Harry Blunt, the owner of Concord Coach Line, and they said, why aren't you doing stuff there? And he said, there's 2 challenges. You want to be very commuter heavy, and commuter is the least profitable part of intercity bus service. You really can't make money because of the low fares you have to offer folks for repeat business. And the other challenge is I'm going to spend a bunch of money on capital, and then you're going to bring rail. So why would I do that? So he said, what I will do is I'll run the service with our model, and if you pay for the capital and subsidy costs, and operating subsidy costs. So BX Route 3 was in the works. That was also around the time, as everyone in this room knows, about the I-93 lawsuit was going on, and the environmental community had a lot of concerns about the widening. One of the requirements for the I-93 project that Wendy so eloquently talked about was mitigation. Boston Express I-93 is part of that mitigation. The state of New Hampshire was required to provide transit options in that corridor to continue with the federal permits and funding. So Boston Express I-93 existing, even if you don't use it, is letting the widening that everyone in this room wants to happen to move forward. So that's why Boston Express exists, solving two state of New Hampshire public policy challenges. Next slide. So 3 points I wanted to hit. This is our history of passengers. Route 3 started first, that's in red. Blue is I-93. As of April of this year, we hit 4.2 million passengers in the history of it existing. About 2.6 million of those is the I-93 corridor. We're operating 28 round trips a day, weekday, and 17 round trips on weekends here in the I-93 corridor. So we'd like to think that's our contribution to economic development, providing options for folks in New Hampshire to be connected to Boston, which makes Southern New Hampshire attractive, and an option for folks from Boston to come up here if they need it. So we're moving a lot of folks in this corridor, and I think it makes it a more attractive to folks who want to be here in Southern New Hampshire. Next slide. Next point I wanted to hit. Unlike Dartmouth Coach and Concord Coach lines, our other two companies, people think of Boston Express as one of our private sector companies. It's really your service. You own the capital as the taxpayers. You direct it. We work with and we obviously offer suggestions about how it should operate, and it gets approved. But it is New Hampshire DOT and the state of New Hampshire and the policymakers who are in charge of Boston Express. So it is a public sector service. If you look at 2014, a number used, a measuring stick for public sector transit is fare box recovery rate. If you see between the two corridors, we operated at 88% out of the fare box. Good public transportation, if you hit the 30 to 50 fare box recovery rate, you're a hero. We're one of the top 10 fare box recovery rates of FTA funded public sector service in the country. So I think even with it being, it doesn't pay for itself, which I know my family's lived in New Hampshire since 1632, so I know the New Hampshire tradition of things paying for themselves. Because it's so commuter heavy, we can't quite get there, but I think you'll be happy to know that in the New Hampshire tradition, we're in the top 10 in the country. So we're getting as close as we can to make it as cost efficient as possible. So that's something we're really proud of. And then the last slide. The last point I wanted to make, people are always curious. This gets back to the point of why Concord Coach lines and Dartmouth Coach are driven by full fare pricing. Our Logan and our single day trips to Boston and our New York City service. So unlike our other our other companies and why we can run it out of the private sector, this is commuter-based transportation. 73% of Boston Express between the two corridors is commuter. 27% obviously is the full fare. Now that's made up of two categories. About 14% of that 27% are folks who are going to Boston. They're just not repeat customers. They only occasionally need to go, and therefore they're paying the full fare. And 13% are folks who are bringing to Logan. So I know it's an important issue around here, and my friend Tom and the issues. I do always like to point out, we are primarily about providing an option in the I-93 and Route 3 corridor to get people in and out of Boston. They're still going to be stuck in traffic because they're going to be able to be on Wi-Fi. They're going to be able to be doing other work. You can't be on the phone, but you can get other work done. And you can get there in the same amount of time you would if you were in your car. And we're reducing stress, and now I'm going to always use John's line, we're extending people's lives. So, so at the end of the day, that's what we do. Our job is to provide alternative transportation, to give folks another option, to get cars off the road, and to support those two public policy needs. of providing Nashua with transit. And I would like to say to my friends in here, this is especially for Peter Griffin over there, you know, there's a lot of talk of rail versus bus in New Hampshire, and we are very strong proponents of the state of New Hampshire pursuing rail if they think that's that public option. And the truth of the matter is, Boston Express Route 3 has shown that transit between Southern New Hampshire and Boston can work. So if you're someone who supports more options for transit in New Hampshire, Boston Express is the best evidence you have that it can work. So I'll leave it at that. I know you folks have a lot of questions and we've thrown a lot at you, so I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you also to Tom and Wendy for your very enlightening presentations. Would like now to begin the Q&A portion of the event. I see Kevin with our first question over here, not wasting any time.
Just so everyone can hear. You're welcome.
My question is for Wendy. It appears that the widening of 93 is wide enough to accommodate 4 lanes. So what I'd like to know is, one, is that true? And two, what is going to be the determining factor of whether or not 93 is eventually 4 lanes or stays at 3 lanes?
Okay, so you have a good eye. It is not wide enough to be 4 lanes. It's about 8 feet too narrow to be 4 lanes. But what we did was we built it wide enough underneath. So think about it, we made the cake to be big enough. We just haven't frosted it wide enough. Think of it that way. All we'll have to do is scrape off the material and put on the 4th lane when the time comes, that extra 8 feet. We've done everything else. All the wetlands impacts are taken care of. Everything's set. What's holding us back right now is part of the I think you had mentioned the environmental, very beginning we had some environmental issues, and part of those environmental issues told us that we need to deal with the salt. There's something called a TMDL, total daily maximum load. And there's 4 basic watersheds that exist within the I-93 corridor. And until we can get the salt down below that level, there's no way the 4th lane is going to happen. With that being said, NHDOT and NHDES are working towards that. We're doing monitoring as far as, you know, making sure we're hitting those numbers. But what are we doing to try to reduce the salt is actually, you may have seen that we now use the brine on the roadways. We've gone to the points of working with the municipalities to try to get their salt use, you know, a little bit less. And so everybody has an allocation. And right now we're working towards that. And if you take a grand look at the whole picture, since we started I-93, not only have we added an additional lane throughout the whole thing, we've also been able to reduce our salt by 20%. We just got to go a little bit more. So it's working at that incremental approach, and I think we're getting close, but we're not there yet.
This one's for Tom. Tom, has that name change had any impact that you can register as far as your numbers?
Yes, so I'll quickly tell you that when I was the operations manager and I stood in the back of the room of our boardroom, and we were told as a group of employees that we were changing the name from Manchester Airport to Manchester Boston Regional Airport, I was among the non-supporters of let's just say that. I was not excited about the name change. But the reason for the name change was a direct result of feedback from Southwest Airlines, who said, you know, we in New Hampshire may feel like Manchester is the center of the universe, but people around the country don't know where Manchester, New Hampshire is. In fact, they generally think of Boston as the capital of New England, period. So in all honesty, it came from Southwest Airlines, and as a result of the name change, what it did is it moved us from page 5 on the internet to page 1. It also prevented people from connecting in Chicago or here thinking they're going to Manchester, England, from coming to Manchester Airport in New Hampshire, which has happened, believe it or not. The other thing that it's done in terms of empirical numbers is it's taken the number of out-of-state travelers from the low 30s, about 32% to 52%, which it is today. So it's been a good change, and now people around the country recognize where we are in terms of the overall geographic area.
Hi, Mark Connors. I volunteer on the Derry Rail Trail Board. So my question is about intermodal transportation. I think what all 3 groups are doing is wonderful. I was actually challenged last year to actually put my money where my mouth is, I guess, and actually commuted from Derry to Peabody, Massachusetts, using my bike and public transportation. I won't be doing it again, but it can be done. And I use Boston Express down to Boston, South Station over to North Station on my bike, took the MBTA, so it can be done. I'm very excited about some of the developments, the new underpass that you're doing in Wyndham for the trail going east-west. It's very exciting to bring that back, since it was kind of closed off when they built 93 on the old rail bed. So excited there. My main concern is exit 4A, where the Derry Rail Trail, where the gap between us and Londonderry Rail Trail right now is going to go right through exit 4A. So I know the commissioner, when he came to Derry to talk about the funding for the environmental impact studies, did make some comments that, you know, that'll be looked at and accommodated. I just want to keep that on everybody's forefront, that major connection between Derry and Londonderry on the rail trail needs to be part of what's going on here too. So the other piece is I haven't done my intermodal transport to Manchester Airport yet, which is my next goal, is to ride my bike and catch one of my flights to go on one of my business trips, just so I can say I did it. So there is a piece that we have to deal with up at the Manchester Airport, and I know your folks have been very good about talking to us, and we hope to make that a reality too. So just your thoughts on, you know, intermodal, also including bicycle traffic into downtown Manchester and other things.
I'll let Wendy answer your question, but just so you know, we do have a bike rack on the first floor of the parking garage.
The 4A, as far as I'm aware, does include the connection, but I'll verify that when I go back. Like I said, I'm not the project manager for that project. I don't want to steal all the thunder. We're only constructing the trail. It's a greenway trail. We're only constructing the box culvert. The town is actually doing the rest of the work, which is great. It's a good teamwork effort. So does that answer everything you were interested in?
We'd love to be teamwork with you too.
Derry?
And that's certainly a priority of the Greater Derry Londonderry Chamber of Commerce, the what's known as the Granite State Rail Trail, which stretches from Salem all the way up to Lebanon, and the longest section of paved trail is, of course, in our section, from including Wyndham and Derry, and we definitely see that as transportation-related economic development too.
Mark, you're actually off the hook this time. I have a question for both Tom and Wendy. Tom, what are the opportunities for Manchester to become an international airport? And Wendy, there is so much incredible development going on along 93 with, Tom alluded to what's happened around the airport, but over 2 million square feet of warehouse space in Londonderry, Pettingill Road, Woodmore Orchards. I live in Windham. There are 3 major developments proposed there, and in Salem. My question to you is, have you done projections as to when you think 93 will be at capacity again?
You got a harder question.
There are projections that of when I-93 will be at full capacity. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to reassess those once we build the third lane. So we will definitely be looking at that, because the goal is that we would want to start construction and be finished with that construction in 2020, because the original projections indicated we would need it by 2020. So because now we're taking some cars off the road and we're doing some other things, we definitely want to look back at those numbers.
Thank you.
So in terms of international service, I guess our best realistic opportunity would be for international charter service. We've spoken with international carriers in the past, and to Mark's point, the very first question that every single one of them asked was not what the economy is like in New Hampshire, not how long is the runway, not what are your operating costs. The very first question from every single one we've ever talked with is, do you have rail? Because that's how Europeans travel. So from Manchester-Boston Regional Airport standpoint, it takes a significant amount of demand to be able to justify international service. So if we did a survey in here today and I said, who wants international service? And everyone raised their hand and I asked, where would you want to go? We'd probably get 30 different answers. So the bottom line is we need to have, we're a state that's made up of a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. We need to have big enough businesses and enough volume and enough connectivity with an international market to justify the demand to present to an airline. So for example, out of the Boston area, London is by far the greatest destination that people travel to. So in order for us to justify that, we need to look at our catchment area, our market area, and see how many people would fly out of Manchester to go to London, and then what is the benefit for an airline at Logan to pick up and move to Manchester and ask people to commute to the north. So we have a big gap in demand that we would need to fill in order to do that. I think realistically, the best case for international service could be made if we got a JetBlue, would be flying to like a Bermuda or to some Caribbean markets. We want to get Fort Lauderdale nonstop so we can connect to all of their new Caribbean and Latin American markets. So that's the most realistic opportunity for us in the short term.
Thank you.
My question's for Todd. I think in one of your original slides, it showed a few years ago you had 22% of your airport volume from Massachusetts, and then that fell to 8% recently, I think you mentioned, because of the Southwest moving into Boston. It seems to me at only 8% Massachusetts clients that you'd have a hard time really becoming the premier regional airport that you desire to be. What plan do you have in place to start attracting more people from Massachusetts?
Well, it's a good question. Well, we have about, for a small airport, we actually do a lot of marketing and advertising. We spend about $800,000 a year marketing online, digitally. If you commute to and from Boston, you see our billboards every day. So we try to be as aggressive as we can in terms of marketing and advertising. But it really comes down to the service that we have. So over the last few years, we're still in this dynamic where people are hearing that the airlines are making money and thinking that they're growing, and they're not. So they're actually still constraining capacity. They're actually still getting a little bit smaller. Some are growing and some markets are growing, but overall the industry is not in a growth mode right now. So we need to be able to demonstrate to the airlines that we have so much demand for service in Manchester that they'll start reinvesting. And it's happened incrementally. People don't jump up and down because airlines aren't adding 8 or 10 or 12 flights a day anymore, because they just don't add that kind of capacity at any airport, let alone a small hub airport. But in terms of the direction we're going now, passenger activity's been up 8 out of the last 10 months, year over year. Cargo is up. Our projects are all going smoothly. The Pettingill Road development has led to lots of economic development in the area. So we need to take all of that information and bundle it together, and when we go to an airline, they know the DOT data. They know how many seats we fill. They know how much of a profit they make. They're looking at the same information that we are. What they say to us, we're one of several hundred airports, for example, when we meet with the American Airlines network planning people. They have 200 cities to look at. So when Manchester, New Hampshire shows up and they know how many seats we fill, they know what their profit margins are, what they say to us is, tell us what we don't know. Tell us what's going on in your area, what's going on in Massachusetts, what's going on in New Hampshire, that would justify us adding capacity, adding more seats, adding more service. And to tell you the truth, we're starting to see the dynamic in Boston change now, where they're attracting so much traffic because of the fare war that's taken place over the last few years, that they're starting to reach the capacity bubble that they hit years ago, which is what initially pushed traffic towards Manchester to the north and Providence to the south. So for me, it's never bad news to hear that Logan's going to have 30 million passengers, because you know what? They're going to get to the point where that means more traffic, more congestion, more delayed flights, higher operating costs for the airlines, and then they're going to look at how do we serve that market more efficiently, and then Manchester's back in the discussion again. Kind of a long answer to, we're working on it.
I'm Scott Cody from Pentucket Bank. I've got a question for Tom. With so many people vacationing down to Southwest Florida and so many people having family members down there and that activity growing, when do you anticipate having nonstop flights to the airport down in Southwest, Fort Myers?
Great question. So Fort Myers is actually a number 10 destination out of Manchester. So the way we get a nonstop to Fort Myers is right now Southwest connects people through BWI. And the reason that they run a lot of the one-stops and not non-stops is they can essentially charge the same amount of money to have you stop and pay twice. So let me just give you an example. We lost our Denver flight even though we were filling 96% of the seats. And we lost it not because we weren't filling seats, but we lost it because Southwest realized they could fly that airplane from Manchester to Midway, fill it up, charge the same amount of money, and then charge folks again to get to Denver or anywhere on the West Coast. We don't like that decision, but you know what? Southwest has made a quarterly profit year after year for over 40 years, and some of the decisions they make we don't like, but they're usually the right business decisions, so we have to support it. So when we look at a market like Fort Myers, we look at how many people are connecting every day through BWI to get to Fort Myers. When it's 22 in our top 25 markets, they don't pay a lot of attention to it. Once it hits the top 10, it becomes a candidate for seasonal service. So the case that we try to make, and airplanes are tough to get these days because the airlines are operating right at capacity. So the case we try to make is give us a seasonal flight for February, March, April. Let us market it, let us advertise it, let people fly nonstop, and if they can charge enough money and make enough money, they'll do it on a seasonal basis, and then hopefully you grow to a full-time basis where it's a regularly scheduled flight. The problem with Florida markets is they're very low yielding markets. They don't make a lot of money. There's so much competition, so many airplanes in Boston and in Pease and in Portland and Manchester, so many flights going to Boston every day. Just to put it in perspective, the average yield, which is cents per seat per mile on every domestic carrier across the country right now, is about 15 cents. The Florida markets average about 8 to 9, maybe 10 cents per seat mile. So they fill up the airplanes, they know they make a little bit of money, but if they're going to add capacity and they want to really add to their bottom line, then they'll look at the business markets, because the business travelers fly more, pay more. So a Midway, a BWI, our New York flights, Newark flights, Philly flights, they make the airlines a lot more money than the long haul flights.
Hi, my question is for Tom. Tom, my name is Bob Rimmel. I'm from Londonderry Trailways, and Mark asked a question about the rail trail at exit 4A. I'm going to ask you the question about the rail trail going around the airport. By the end of 2017, Londonderry will have the rail trail up to Harvey Road and the airport. By the end of 2017, Manchester will have the rail trail down to Perimeter Road at the airport. Have you guys started thinking about the rail trail going around the airport? I know it's in your master plan, and also a bike path connector to the Ray Resort Bridge. Have you guys been thinking about that? I mean, we're ready to talk, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I may not be the right person, and I know for a long time, as we were developing the airport, we always made sure that we didn't cut off the rail trail. So we support that, and we've actually worked with the City of Manchester and the town of Londonderry to create some opportunities to build trails. Even we've got one in Londonderry in the adjacent to Raymond Mazurek Way, where we own a piece of land that we had to put into mitigation, and we were able to actually put a bike path through an adjacent piece of that, not through the middle of it. But so absolutely we support it, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with our properties director and make sure that it stays on the radar, for sure.
Any other questions?
This is for Mark. When are we going to see the bus service stop at the airport?
I'm assuming you're meaning Manchester Airport, so.
Yes.
Well, the truth of the matter is, there just isn't the demand for that, for public transit to Manchester Airport. A couple of examples of that, and then an attempt at the reason. The newly, well, fairly new, newly introduced Portsmouth to Manchester line that has been running, the east-west, hasn't yielded anywhere near the numbers that it was expected to or originally projected. When I was still at New Hampshire DOT, we implemented a Manchester to Concord. We worked with the Manchester Transit Authority to get that going, and it originally stopped at the airport. And with the support of Mark Brewer and the folks there, Mike Whitten and the folks at MTA eliminated the Manchester Airport piece of that because their demand was the downtown to downtown. Manchester Airport, through great work by the folks at the airport and the great works of the state, have made the Manchester Airport one of the most friendly, accessible drop-off and pick-up airports in the country. The reason folks use our services to go to Logan is because it is one of the least friendly places to drop off and pick up and to park. And this is not a commentary on the level, but the Logan Airport's goal is to hit 40 million passengers within the next 3 years. As Tom pointed out, Manchester Airport does about 2 million right now, 2.1-ish. So it's really interesting. If you look at public transportation demand to airports, the amount of people who want to do it, the percent is pretty similar. So you can tell the airports where you're going to have really successful rail and bus connections to, because it's going to be about the same percentage, but you need that percentage to be of 30, 40, 50 million, not of 2, 3, 4, 5 million. And just to show you we're consistent in our private sector company, Concord Coach lines, Portland, Maine to Boston is our single busiest location. We don't serve the Jetport either, the Portland Jetport, because there just isn't the demand. With Boston Express, we are using your tax dollars to run that service, and we want to be good stewards of it. And it has just shown that the accessibility, the ease, the folks who are using Manchester Airport, they've made it so accessible, they've made parking so easy, they've made the pickup drop-off. The reasons people use public transportation to go to airports just don't exist at the Manchester Airport. So you just would have very, very, very low ridership that would just be costing your taxpayer dollars for not much benefit.
If I could just add on quickly, I left some Fast Pass cards on your table, and I certainly didn't come here to try to sell anyone anything. I didn't honestly. But I just wanted, that's a good segue, and one of the discussions that we have all the time, one of the biggest challenges we have as a small hub airport is providing regularly scheduled ground transportation, because people in New Hampshire, number one, are wed to their vehicles, and number two, our schedule is so spread out and we just don't have the type of volume that a major city has, so it makes parking a challenge. So one of the things that we said to ourselves is, if we can't control the fares, we can't control the number of flights, I mean, we can influence this to some extent, but what is it that we can do to add value to the equation when someone is comparing, do I fly out of Manchester or do I fly out of Boston Logan? And one of the things that we do is we created this Fast Pass program. It's free to join, and basically you assign a credit or a debit card to this Fast Pass, which shows up in the mail, and you basically just wave it to get in any of the parking lots. You don't get a ticket when you go in. Your account is charged automatically. You don't wait in line when you leave. You wave your card and go. And the good thing about that is business travelers use this a lot. So you get a point for every dollar that you spend. So business travelers build up points when they travel on business, and then they redeem those points to travel as a leisure traveler in the summertime. So it's really kind of a win-win. It's a customer loyalty program. It doesn't cost anything, and we did that because we knew if we built up this loyalty program, then when people look at parking, they look at travel time, they look at maybe even a disparity in fares, then it kind of helps them lean a little bit towards Manchester. When we put the program together, we thought if we got 200 to 300 people of the 200 to 300 of the core business travelers, the people that use the airport the most, then we would consider the program successful. 200 or 300 we would have been happy with. As of last week, we passed 1,800. And the feedback has been great, because I bump into people all the time that say, you know what, I've already accrued X number of points, I'm traveling on vacation this summer, and I'm parking for free. So we did it to make, as Mark pointed out, the process easier, the process more efficient, but also more cost effective for people.
And Tom, I just want to make one other point, sir, before your question. As a provider of alternative transportation, we believe in multimodalism. And as Granite Staters, we want the Manchester Airport to be successful. So, I want to make sure the folks in this room know we balance trying to run the most efficient, cost-effective service with wanting to support all the economic engines of New Hampshire. We know Manchester Airport, one, it's important to New Hampshire. We're the strongest supporters of it, and if it made sense, and I think Tom would back it up, we've had many conversations with Mark Brewer, Tom, before, when Brian O'Neill was still here as deputy director, we'd be the strongest supporters of it, and it's just, we all collectively understand that type of service, the type of service we move, a 51-person bus, that is huge, carrying 2 or 3 people, and half the time that would include the driver, just doesn't make a lot of sense. So we believe in multimodalism. We support all the modes in New Hampshire, and we support all our important economic drivers. And as Granite Staters, we want everything to succeed. So But we just balance that with trying to run the best product we can and the best service we can.
Good morning. My name is Jim Goss. I live in Derry. I am a frequent traveler of both the bus and the airline. One of my questions, I guess, well, a comment to the bus people. Thank you very, very much for the service that you provide. It is an excellent way of getting, no slight, please, but it is an excellent way of getting to Logan Airport. My question is more to Manchester-Boston Regional Airport. As a very, very frequent flyer to the city of Denver, you talked about because of the current fare wars, I believe I heard something about fare wars. Over the last couple of years, every trip that I have made to Denver, unless I have really, really searched out the red eyes or something like that, the fares have continued to go up and up and up and up, to the point where they are significantly more expensive now, and each time we go to search. Please expound just a little bit more about these fare wars so I can be educated and take advantage of some of them?
Absolutely. So the fare wars that I referenced were a result of Southwest going into Boston in 2009 to compete with JetBlue and the other low-cost carriers. So basically what happened when Southwest went into Boston Logan, and some of you probably experienced this, just take BWI for example. Southwest would offer a $99 fare. JetBlue would offer a $79 fare. Another airline would offer a $69 fare. So that was the dynamic that took place as a result of the #1 domestic carrier, known as being the low-cost